You want to cut through the noise and, get right to the heart of things, right? Really understand stuff without getting bogged down.
Absolutely.
That's what this deep dive is all about. We take sources, pull out the key info, add a bit of perspective.
Make it stick.
Exactly. So today, we're looking at two big ideas: recession and debt. They're always in the news.
And our starting point might seem a bit unusual. We're actually looking at a transcript from, well, a YouTube video for English
All right.
learners.
It's kind of unexpected.
Yeah, but while its main goal was language, it actually lays out these economic ideas pretty clearly. Our mission here is to sort of build on that, unpack what recession and debt really mean beyond just the language lesson.
Okay, got it. So the video starts with some basic vocabulary. First up, recession.
Hmm.
They define it simply as a time when a country's economy is doing poorly, making less money. Simple, but big consequences.
Big consequences, exactly. And the video does a good job of showing what that looks like almost immediately. It
Yeah.
mentions people losing jobs. That's very real, very personal. And companies closing down or going bankrupt. That shows it's, a system-wide thing.
Right. And decrease spending. That makes sense. People get worried.
For sure. And falling stock prices, too, that reflects a wider lack of confidence in the economy. They even mention the U.S. as a current example, which kind of brings it down to earth.
Okay. And the second term they quickly define is broke.
Ah, yes.
Just means having no money. Pretty blunt.
It is blunt, but it really highlights the potential personal hit from these bigger economic problems we're discussing.
It does.
Yeah.
And then there's this dialogue they use. It really drives home that personal impact.
Yeah, tell us about that.
So there's this guy asking for help from a character named Mr. Corleone.
Okay, that name rings a bell. Sounds like maybe someone with influence.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
The man needs help because the recession cost him his job, and now he's drowning in debt.
What kind of debt?
The usual suspects, really. Credit card bills, car payments, a mortgage. And on top of that, his son's college tuition. It's just piling up.
Wow. That's a lot. That's a scenario many people could unfortunately relate to in a downturn.
Definitely. But here's the kicker, the real twist.
Uh,
Mr. Corleone, the guy you'd expect to be fine, he claims he's broke too because of the recession and the stock market crash.
no kidding. That's surprising,
Yeah.
even for a fictional scenario.
Right. It seems almost over the top.
But maybe that's the point. It sort of underlines how widespread a really bad recession could be. The idea that even someone seemingly powerful or financially secure isn't immune, it really highlights the systemic risk, doesn't it?
That's a good point. It shows nobody is totally safe. Now, since this source is for English learners, they naturally focus a bit on specific words, like loan,
Okay.
defining it as borrowing money, and crucially pointing out it's not the same as a loan.
Ah, yes, a common mix-up for learners, but understanding loan is fundamental here.
And then mortgage. They explain it's a specific loan for property.
Right, and they mention the silent T, which is a practical pronunciation tip. But beyond pronunciation, understanding a mortgage as this huge long-term debt tied to your home, that's vital. Think about the stress if you lose your job during a recession.
Absolutely. That's a massive weight.
Right.
They also explain the phrase, hit me pretty hard,
Ah, yeah. How do they explain that?
using examples like a divorce or getting a really bad cold.
Yeah.
Things that genuinely affect you negatively.
Okay, relatable examples, so it conveys emotional impact, not just the facts.
Exactly. So when the character says the recession hit him pretty hard, you feel the weight of the job loss and the debt.
That makes sense. It adds that emotional dimension.
And one more vocabulary item. Tuition.
Right, for school fees.
Yeah, money paid for studying, usually college or university. Another major expense that gets really tough in hard times.
Oh, definitely. Tuition costs, student loans. That's a huge burden, a recession hidden when you're dealing with that. It can be devastating for future plans.
For sure. Okay, so then the video moves on to what they call fluency builders, more natural ways to say things.
Useful stuff.
First one is, what can I do for you? Instead of just, can I help you?
Mm-hmm. A bit more polite, maybe slightly more formal.
Yeah, that's how they frame it. Good for initial interactions, maybe more professional settings.
Right. Even in that tense scene with Mr. Corleone, using that phrase sets a certain initial tone.
Interesting. Another phrase is, I'm really sorry to trouble you. Or asking, can I trouble you for a moment?
Ah, the polite apology for interrupting or asking for something.
Exactly. They give examples like needing a signature, asking your boss to leave early, borrowing a pen.
Standard politeness markers. Essential for smooth interactions. You can see how the man in the dialogue might use that, given he's asking for a big, unusual favor from Corleone. It shows he knows he's imposing.
Good point. And the last phrase is, on top of all that.
Meaning also, or in addition.
Right. They show how it works for piling on bad things, lost job, car stolen, broke up with partner.
Ugh, a bad rub.
But also for good things like it's my birthday, my family's visiting, and I got loads of presents on top of all that.
Huh. Okay, so it just means accumulation, good or bad.
Yep. And in the dialogue, it really stresses the weight on the guy job loss, plus the car payment, plus the mortgage, and on top of all that, the tuition.
Really paints a picture of being overwhelmed.
It does. Now, this next part is fascinating. The video brings in a cross-cultural angle on debt.
Oh, interesting. How so?
It contrasts the North American view. They specifically mention Canada, where having debt is pretty normal.
Yeah, almost expected sometimes.
And even seen as necessary to build a credit history for things like loans or mortgages. Contrasting that with Europe, using Switzerland as an example, where people tend to be much more cautious about debt.
That's a really significant difference. It shows how much culture shapes our view of money and borrowing.
Totally.
In North America, that credit history is often key, isn't it? You almost need it to get ahead, to get approved for big things. So managing debt responsibly becomes part of the financial landscape.
Right. And they even tell this anecdote about banks in North America practically chasing university students, 18-year-olds, to sign up for credit cards.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Sometimes offering freebies or incentives.
Exactly. It kind of normalizes getting into credit and debt really early on.
It does. And that early, easy access might foster a different mindset compared to places where credit is harder to get or maybe carries more of a, well, a stigma.
Then they flip to the Swiss example, where to get a credit card, you might need to deposit more money than the credit limit itself, like security.
Wow, that's completely different. It's all about having the funds first. Much more risk-averse.
It really highlights how our ideas about debt aren't universal at all. They're tied to our culture, our financial systems.
Well, absolutely.
And the video connects this back to recessions, saying that this prevalence of debt in North America makes people more vulnerable when the economy tanks.
That's the crucial link. High personal debt definitely magnifies the pain of a recession. If you lose your job, those debt payments don't just disappear.
No kid.
And if asset prices fall, like house prices, it can make things even worse, especially if you have a mortgage.
So after all that, the video's advice is pretty straightforward.
Let me guess. Be careful with your money.
Basically, yeah. Handle money carefully. Avoid unnecessary debt. Simple advice, but always relevant.
Timeless wisdom, really. Sensible financial management is always a good idea, recession or not. It builds resilience.
Mm-hmm. And they finish with a quick audio review, just running through those keywords again. Trouble, recession, hit me pretty hard, debt, on top of all that, and broke.
Yeah, hearing them in context again helps lock them in. It's a good summary. Even though it was originally for language learning, it recaps the core ideas well.
So let's try to bring it all together. We've looked at what recession and debt basically mean, how they feel on a personal level through that fictional story.
Explored some related vocabulary and common phrases.
Right, and touched on those interesting cultural differences in how we view debt.
Yeah, and it's kind of neat how a resource designed for language learning actually gave us a solid jumping off point for these big economic topics. It's a reminder, really, that these concepts, recession, debt, they affect everyone, regardless of language. Financial literacy is pretty universal.
Well said. So for you, listening in, hopefully this deep dive sparked by that English lesson gives you a clearer, maybe quicker understanding of recession and debt and some of the nuances around them.
A shortcut to getting informed.
Exactly.
And that leads to maybe a final thought for you to chew on. How does your own cultural background, your personal history, shape how you think about debt? And thinking about our discussion today, how might big economic events like recessions influence those views, or maybe your own financial choices going forward? It's definitely worth considering the role debt plays both out there in the wider world and maybe closer to home in your own life.